Welcome, Maddie. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about so many different topics today, including motherhood and finding our purpose and self-care and how we can be more effective in business as mothers too. But before we begin all of that, can you tell us one thing that you did today that was nourishing for you or purposely taking care of you?
Absolutely. So, on summer mornings, which is, I often just start my day in my garden. So I grab like my cold brew and I walk out, and generally one or two of my children follows me out there, and I just start my day reconnecting with my little patch of earth in my garden, and just like feeling sun on my face, and it helps me prepare for the day ahead and whatever it's going to hold. So.
Oh, that's lovely. Gardening is just the best, isn't it? Sunshine. Oh, just the best. So
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I think that probably I should start at the beginning. So 15 years ago, I was pursuing a traditional career in New York City, in a financial services model. And I started having children, and I knew I wanted to have many, like as many children as was kind of mentally possible for me. And I had this vision of a lifestyle that was really different from the city. So after my second child, I began to pivot out of my financial career and into more of a coaching model. And I did that for a decade. And then this past year, recently, I actually decided to like reincorporate everything, because I found that with supporting women, especially and moms, with health and life and purpose, I found that, at the bottom of a lot of it is reconnecting with ourselves as, impactful beings, and with our financial world. And so I ended up reconnecting all of them and pivoting to where I partner with a financial firm now and do a lot of financial planning and financial services for women, mothers, business owners who are females. And I just find that to be like a really sweet spot for me, where I can use a lot of my hard skills, but also the coaching skills. So that's kind of the journey that I can take. And I can tell you there's been specific moments of complete pivots based on even just burnout, or realizing, hey, what I'm doing now is not sustainable. And I think even something that we share, like I was homeschooling for a little while during COVID, and I loved it, but that was also a hat that I felt like I couldn't wear anymore based on the goals I had in my other parts of my life too. So, sometimes we have these chapters and seasons of life, and both ourselves and our families can give us indications of where we need to focus. So, that's just a quick kind of intro, but we can go into any of that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the pivots that you brought up there. This is something that can be tricky because often we are on certain paths. We've gone to university and we're really focused on some career, let's say, and
Right.
then kids come into the picture and that totally changes things, or the pivots could be completely different. But how do you help people navigate that? Or what do you suggest that we can do to make those transitions easier? Because they can be met with a
Mhm.
lot of resistance. It's hard. Change is hard, isn't it? So how can we make pivots just a little bit easier and maybe more exciting? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. People often ask me, like, what are you doing now? Because they sort of assume that, like, every couple years I have kind of embraced this. And there's actually studies and articles and research that show the effectiveness if someone really digs in and says, do I want to be doing this? Like, so often we get on autopilot, right? Like you said, we go in university and then we just stay on this track of this is what I said I wanted to do, even when we're losing our passion and interest. So I read really powerful articles and research that shows people who end up making a switch into a new industry, or just really intentionally building their career, are so much more happy and impactful. I think those two things, like they are personally more fulfilled and they're having a bigger impact. So I think that's the permission that we have to give ourselves to say, look, you have to trust your instincts and you have to follow, and there are going to be people that resist. I know when I left a very traditional finance career to become a coach, everyone said, that's crazy. Why are you doing that? You're not going to be able to have like make the future for your family that you want. And I said, well, no, I can. And I tend to be the kind of person that if you resist and say like, you can't be done, then I'm just going to prove it to you. So I think even knowing yourself and knowing in those moments, find those people that are going to cheer you on, because of course you'll have resistance, but there are going to be people that have that vision with you. I remember a few key friendships at each of my pivots that carried me through, even when like family or other folks like didn't fully understand. So I think, yeah, build your tribe that's in that growth mindset and just run with those people through your, I guess, transitions.
Yeah, it's so helpful to find those people. I know for myself, I was a clinical psychologist working
Mm,
in centers. Even before I had my first kid, I was doing my
right.
own work, but still at different centers. So I was
Mm,
contracted, so not an employee anymore. I was like one step away from that, but it was a
right.
real transition moving into fully having my own business. And for
Mm,
years, I had moments where I thought, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this working? Because there's so many people who aren't doing that path, and it can be hard to be on a path that is just different to those around you. So for me, it was so valuable to find other
mm,
entrepreneurs that were also health professionals. So I could work alongside them and we could understand each other and
mm,
motivate each other and tell each other that we're on the right path for us. So it was really
mm.
valuable to have those people. What about though for people
Yeah.
who don't have a sense that like they don't know what they want to do. They're unhappy with what they're doing and they want to make a pivot and they want to make a change, but they don't know like what their purpose is. What do you do? How do you help people in that situation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It is definitely something that I love to do through my coaching, but also I created a life design course, which is like 5 weeks of, I would say, really when someone is like, all right, I'm feeling a little stuck and struggling, but a lot of times we don't have a clear answer of like what to change. We're like, let me change everything in my life. And that's not realistic, you know? So the 5 week course is really meant to kind of like help people take really small, concrete, and impactful steps towards bigger changes. A lot of times it starts with like really small daily habits or things you can shift related to your home environment or your energy or your what you're reading or how you think about yourself. And then like from that, I think bigger clarity appears because as I said before, like we're so trained to just get into a routine and a rut, and that's sort of like is what accepted culturally. So to pull ourselves out of that takes a lot of effort. And, like we talked about, having that community that I think you hit on so well, just people that are like you that are kind of swimming upstream or doing something different. And anyway, so I think, yeah, I would say that it definitely is going to take some effort if you're in your current situation and you're frustrated, but you're not quite sure like what exactly can to change. And I have seen through my coaching and through my work with people, just amazing things. A lot of times it is sometimes if people are frustrated, there's often some bigger vision or a business that they need to birth and they're a little intimidated to do so. But I've seen a lot of people that I've worked with, even if it's moms that are like, okay, I don't know if I have time to do something else in addition to being a kid, to being with my kids. But then we sort of chart this course, like finding, hey, you can do this thing that you love and you can spend like 10 hours a week and you can actually make that space for yourself and be 10 times happier and more fulfilled, and then other people who might be in a different traditional career and, just need to really reevaluate everything. So, I guess I would say, and there's not like an easy path per se, but I think that that's something that if you are really serious about it, there you can, um, press pause on your life as it is and spend time really thinking about even your 7-year-old self. A lot of times at 7 we're clearer on like what we want to do or who we want to be or how we can serve than we are like in our 30s, right? So I know myself at 7 I was very entrepreneurial and very people oriented and just coming up with a new business idea every week, right? And so now, like, that's what I get to do. I get to literally help business owners, realize their business visions and goals and to do that myself. So that's something that I would say is pretty practical. You can go back to like that moment and maybe for you, I don't know, what were you thinking at 7, like that, how it ties into what you do now?
Yeah, it 7 is a really significant time, isn't it? Because by then that's when
Yes.
we've developed a lot of our understandings and our beliefs about ourselves, about others, about the world,
Yeah.
and we're starting to be a bit more grounded in reality and less in that dreamy time of early
Mhm.
childhood. I'm thinking back to when I was 7. I know maybe a little bit later than 7, I always wanted to be a writer, so that's something that I'm doing now, which
Yeah,
is
that's
really exciting, and
amazing.
the little girl in me definitely is thrilled at that concept, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that's I love that going back to childhood, we can find out more and remind ourselves about what we
Mhm.
are passionate about and what excites us. And some things will shift, but there often is a real through line there, some consistency
Mhm.
or things that we've just totally forgotten about that we used to just love. And it might not even be a
Yeah.
career, but it might be something else like a hobby that we can start doing more of to reinvigorate
Right.
us. And that can have ripple effects, can't it?
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. I think you're right. Sometimes it's just the smaller changes that end up, when you create, like you asked the first question, what are those things you did for yourself today? And it might take 10, 20 minutes, an hour, and it can make a radical shift in how you feel about everything. So I think that's an amazing way that reframe things for moms, because a lot of times we feel like, oh, I don't have time for these big changes. I'm kind of just in it in the moment with my kids. So I'd love to hear even more about, from you, some of the different habit building tips that you give.
I think starting small is really big, something that I talk about in my work with clients and in my books, especially in my second book, Nourished Mama. It's all about micro habits. And that book is focused on micro habits to help build us to be healthy and vital and have abundant energy in motherhood. But we can use that
Love
in
that.
any respect. Yeah, like those micro habits can be so useful because it can be
Mhm.
overwhelming to say, okay, now you have to go and exercise for an hour and then you have to eat
Mhm.
all organic and you have to get 8 hours of straight sleep with no wake ups. For some moms and people in
Yeah.
general, that can be totally overwhelming, right? For most people. So if we can just
Yeah.
make small changes, the smallest change you can make, maybe it's waking up and having a glass of
Mhm.
water instead of having a coffee immediately. It can be that little change that can just start to build other habits. So that habit can lead on to when you're at the grocery store, you might get one
Mm.
item that's organic instead of all your items that are organic now.
Mm.
Or it can be anything. It depends on what your goals are, but just those micro shifts can be so helpful to just build on each other. And soon enough, if you keep doing those little things, your life starts to change. And a second thing that I really like to
Mm.
do, other than that, is look at your decisions and ask yourself as you go through your day, does this support me in becoming a better version of myself? Or does this support
Mhm.
me in achieving the goals that I want? And it's good to be specific depending on like what that goal is and ask yourself
Mm.
that. Or does this take me further away from that? So if in the context of being healthy and having energy, let's say as a mother, you could ask yourself, does having this fourth cup of coffee in the afternoon support me to be as healthy as I can be and get the best sleep that
Mhm.
I can and have the most energy for my kids? Or does this
Mhm.
take away from that? And does that move me further away? And
Mhm.
asking yourself this question a few times throughout your day as you are going about big, but ideally just starting with those small decisions can really start to move your life in the direction that you want to. So you are no longer on autopilot, but you're a little
Mm.
bit more intentional with your decisions. And we can't do this with every question and every little thing we do in our day. That would be overwhelming. But if we can do it
Mm.
even once a day with what we're doing, it starts to shift things.
I love that. Yes, I know a book that had a big impact on me was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this idea of habit stacking, like tricking our brains into thinking of positive habits and putting them together. I know that had a big impact on me too, in terms of how I approach my mornings and my evenings, especially. I know the book that we were just speaking about before, the 10X book. he speaks about how like the last hour of your day is the most important. And I think for moms, that's so challenging and also just a great reminder of like, let's not, even I'm guilty of this. Like, oh, I get to the end of my day and I just want to ignore everything and just watch a movie or scroll for a little while and kind of like unplug, disconnect. But that blue light time and that screen and kind of like half an hour turns into 45 minutes. And then next thing you know, you're like, I didn't do all the things I wanted to do to prepare for my following day. So I think even just one habit that anyone listening to this, like thinking about your last hour of your day and how to really intentionally structure that for the most positive following day. And that's something that I think about, especially, in the summertime, because we wake up, or like in the fall with, September, we have like where the kids are off to school or you have more structured mornings. And so I think how you set that up is really important. And even just, I will put things around the kitchen where I have like saved myself nanoseconds of time to move things, or just have like everything exactly how I want it so that I'm not having to make a lot of decisions early in the morning. I'm finding stuff. So little things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's so helpful. That last hour of the day, often if we stay up late, we're not doing many useful things anyway. So going to bed early and being intentional with that last hour of what can I do to set myself up for a better, easier morning is just brilliant. I love that you do that. And with six
Yeah.
kids, I imagine that's a necessity at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I want to put it back to you and say I love that you've published those books that we can have in hand, because I always believe as moms, like we really need to nourish ourselves and get that support. And books are such a powerful way to do that. There's so many times it's like you're like, "Oh, I'm going to read some articles online," but then you kind of get lost and you're looking for that nourishment, but I think sometimes like just having like your book by the bedside table, or just something that's going to feed us a little bit and that allows us to stay disconnected. I think that's super important, for moms. So I love
Yeah,
that you did that.
and that plays into that nighttime, doesn't it? Because if you are on your screen reading those articles, it can be
Yeah.
disruptive to your sleep and your melatonin and everything. So having a
Yeah.
book is just such a great alternative. Yeah, I'm biased. I just love books. They are more
Absolutely.
nourishing, whereas like being on screens actually isn't a break for your brain. It's overwhelming
Right.
and you need a break after, but we actually in today's day and age, we're usually using screens as our break. So our brains are
Mm,
almost never getting a break unless we're asleep.
right. No, absolutely. Yeah, and something else that we wanted to speak about too, related to, I think, entering a new season. So the school year starting for many, depending on what your schooling model looks like, there tends to be more structure and more opportunities to kind of build the day the way that we want to. And I know for me, I always take opportunities each quarter to set quarterly goals. And so I guess, September, it kind of, you could set it for the end of the year and then like give yourself December to like relax. You could have like a 3 month goal in September, kind of a 90-day goal that kind of gets you close to the end of the year. And I think especially as mothers and business owners, like it's hard for us to look ahead more than 90 days. Life just changes so much with kids. So that was a big thing that I spoke about. I really love this book, The 12-Week Year, which is this idea for us to give ourselves permission to like shrink year goals into 12-week goals. They could still be ambitious, they could still be stretch goals, but just to give ourselves like a shorter horizon so that we actually are looking at those every day and taking concrete actions. And then we're able to recalibrate every 90 days. So for me, that like September to end of November is a really powerful chunk where a lot of really good things can happen, especially when we set it up to look at it that way and then give ourselves permission to fully reset and then start the new year. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that and kind of
Yeah.
how you structure your goal setting in the second half of the year.
Yeah. Before we get into that, is that something that you do with clients?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. I've heard about these 90-day chunks of time to focus your goals, and I've I've done a little bit of that, but I've never being super consistent with it. So, yeah, I'd wanna know more from you about, like, how do we do
Yeah.
that? Like, in theory, it sounds
Yeah.
amazing, but what do we do? Do
Right.
we think about, like, what do I wanna do this year? And then we decide, I'm gonna do that in 90 days? Because sometimes that can be
Yeah.
invigorating and also terrifying. So what do you recommend? Like, how do we actually
Yeah.
practically do it?
Okay, yeah, that's a great challenging question for me. I think definitely for me, I always do have somewhat of an annual plan in mind that I work very closely with business coaches and mentors, and I think having that accountability is so important always, wherever we're at. Or on the motherhood side, like even working with coaches that are really just focused on your motherhood and your goals. I think giving ourselves permission to say, hey, this is a profession. Motherhood is like a really really something we should take seriously, and be able to say, hey, I'm improving on this. I think so many times we're like, people even culturally like discredit as like, oh, she's just a mom, or and I've pushed back on that so much, even when I obviously am a mom who likes to wear other hats, and I tell my kids and I tell others like it does feed me and my motherhood. But I think that we have to really reclaim the narrative that like motherhood itself is the most important. It definitely, for me, the most important hours of my day are when I'm with my kids. And so how do we reframe, but going back to the goal setting, it is something where you need people that are going to challenge you and stretch you with your goals, right? And like that kind of 10x impact mentality. Like if all of us shared this podcast with 10 friends, then you have your 10x. Like you've reached that many more people. And it's not always on you, right? It's like building this momentum and this tribe to increase our impact. So I'm speaking kind of more from an entrepreneurial perspective, but I think even in motherhood, it's like those stretch goals, whatever we think is like the outside limit of what we can achieve, having someone in our life that's like, well, you think that's the limit, but I see something even bigger for you. And having that vision shared and having that, I definitely would not be where I am today if I hadn't had people like pushing me to have a bigger vision and to see things differently. And like, we talked about before, there's always the naysayers that are like, why are you trying to do all this in a day? Right? Like to you, why are you trying to homeschool your kids and, make this big impact with clients and all these things? They say why? Because they are happier and comfortable in their limited life. They think they are. So I think it's really just kind of going back to like where we started the conversation, it's like having those people that are going to help us shape a new vision consistently. And yeah, in terms of practical, yeah, you have to have those people that are going to review your goals with you. And, I think encourage you to check in, accountability. And sometimes it is about things that like, how do I explain this? It's like those things that we're afraid of, they're often right. Like everything you want, there's this quote that says, everything you want is on the other side of fear, your fears. And so a lot of times those things that we are like most kind of apprehensive or fearful about, it's like that's a signal that we need to work towards that. And a book that I actually love, and I think it's probably the most important book that I'll ever recommend to anyone, is called The War of Art. And it doesn't sound like something, it's not about war. It's kind of about art, but it's more about the creative process and that resistance that we spoke about. So it's this idea that anytime we're at work on something big and important, like when you said, I left my clinical practice, everything that was normal, traditional, and I dove out on my own, and you have all these things resisting against that. And then you also have some positive forces that are like pushing you, whether it's within you or outside of you. And I think just this book just kind of breaks that all open, and it gives us permission to like live in that fear and that resistance and say, this is a signal that I'm on the right path. Like any day you wake up, like I woke up this morning, I didn't have the best night of sleep. My 10-month-old is teething and sick. And my day was invigorating, like thinking about my day and what I had ahead of me. I was like anticipating, I was excited, I was a little nervous of certain things that I'm going to do. And I want to be on that edge. I think all of us want to be on that edge of how can I challenge myself every day? Because that flow state that we talk about, that, we're using this word very casually, but that flow state experience is like when we're facing that challenge and we're not shying away from it. What are your thoughts on all that? I just said a lot. Sorry.
No, I have so many thoughts on that. And I agree with it so much that we need that accountability. We need that support. We need those people around us that are pushing us and seeing that we can do more than what we think we can
Mhm.
do. I work with,
Yeah.
well, maybe not work with, but I have a friend who we're both in business, and we both have our own businesses, and we get
Mhm.
together and we talk about our goals, and often hers are smaller than I think they could be. And it's really useful to have
Mm.
that
Mm.
conversation with her. And she probably sees that in me too. And we motivate each
Yeah.
other to think bigger. And then when somebody else outside of you who knows you believes that you can do that, you start having that belief yourself. So I think that having those
Mhm.
people is so useful. And
I love
reading
that.
these books that you're suggesting, like I've written them all down, so I'll put those in the show notes. They're such good
Yes.
books because they do help us to step outside our comfort zone, open up our perspective, because sometimes we
Mm.
don't have the people or mentors or supports in our lives to do that, but books or podcasts or
Mhm.
courses can be those supports for us and to help us to broaden what we think we can do. And I loved
I
your
love that.
point there about fear because it's so easy to be in your comfort zone and it's scary to go outside of it, right? So
Yes.
reframing that is essential and that is what's going to help move us towards what we want, and to actually notice when fear comes up and see that as, oh, maybe this is something I might want to move towards, rather than automatically shut down and think that's not for me because fear comes up. So I think looking at what those emotions are telling us can be so helpful, because that fear might be there trying to keep you safe and trying to keep you small from something that you really actually want to do. So I think those are all
Mm.
really, really helpful points to help us to move towards goals that we want to achieve, and just whether it's in motherhood or whether it's in business or whatever it is. And I think you're absolutely right that motherhood, it is a profession. It's the most important thing in my mind that I'm going to do. And I love the other work that I do, but it's not to the same extent as motherhood is in the impact that I'm leaving. And
Right. And
I know,
every other profession, you get so much professional development and tools and support, right? And motherhood, it's like they're just thrown into it and like, oh, hopefully you pick up some things along the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
that's where your work is so important too, of like saying, hey, we have to gather tools and resources and find those things that are really gonna support us.
absolutely. And I notice as I go through my days, I'm excited when I do things professionally that have impact, but often at this moment, over the honestly last couple of years, my proudest moments and my biggest achievements are when I've handled a situation well with my kids and I've
Mm.
taught them through modeling my own emotional regulation. Things like
Mm.
that are where I'm having the biggest impact, I believe. Like all the other stuff is great too, but those things are so important. So I think if we can get support in motherhood and we can see it as a profession and intentionally have goals there, like why not? Why would we not do that? We do it in every
Love
other
that.
aspect of our life, right?
Absolutely. No, I think that's really important. And, the other element that I thought of when you were speaking, it's like a lot of times we do create this culture of busyness and we celebrate just like being busy and like having our schedules packed. And sometimes it's so that we don't actually face like those inner workings and those longings in our heart. Because you were asking earlier, how is it that you can like help somebody move from, hey, I'm over here and I'm stuck and not really happy with my life, to, hey, I'm on the right path. And a lot of it for me with the clients I work with, it comes to clearing out our schedules, creating space, opening up some uncomfortable space in our life that is going to be like, well, I'm not just on autopilot, just saying yes to everything and doing everything and then never finding that at the end of the day, am I on my chosen path, my purposeful path, right? So that's a big part of my life design course is like, I challenge people to take their schedule, like tear it apart, open up big chunks in even like, obviously professional motherhood lives, but just find space. And then in that space starts to come the inspiration and the new vision and that recalibration with ourselves. Like even right now, I'm thinking of our 7-year-old or like our children, they need boredom in the summer. They need a little bit. Like if they're over programmed, they're just on this rat race and they're not happy. My kids we have an au pair and they have a schedule that's very loose, but like they have to have time in their day to reset and to kind of that's when they just go deeper into who they are and what hobbies they would choose on their own and all of that. So I think all of this really ties back together to, the way we are with our children, and like I learn from my children every day about kind of how to go through life with a little
Yeah.
bit more curiosity and joy.
And how do you create that space? Because that sounds amazing. And I absolutely agree. But I could imagine a lot of listeners are thinking,
Yeah.
how? I'm really busy because I have
Right.
to do all the things. So, what are some tips that you have to help people to actually create space?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to actually like looking at where our time is going, because a lot of times we don't really know where it's going. And I have this kind of formula that I use, and it's, in a 20, like we all have, this is actually a great book too. We all have 168 hours in our week. And so you can look around and you can say, like, it seems like some people are using their time and they're happy with how they're using their time. Other people, it's like the hours are just lost, right? Like if we actually are conscious of how many hours we go on our phones and check randomly, just scroll Instagram or just check for something, and then it turns into like 30 minutes of I didn't really need to be on here, but and so the first part is getting really honest with yourself of like where your time is going. And I think even for moms, a lot of things we say yes to, we feel obliged, right? It's like people ask, "Oh, can you like help out with this committee, or can you do this or that?" And it's like we have a hard time sometimes saying no. And I'm sure that's a lot with like, your work with moms too. It's having that awareness of like, where is my yes coming from? Is it coming from my best self? Is this coming from this is aligned with me? And if not, I have to say no, especially because like you said, the work we're doing with our little ones is so important. And what you're talking about with emotional regulation and like just awareness, like it requires space in the day. My toddlers do not like it when our day is like overscheduled and they're having to move through transitions quickly. So all these things, I think the biggest like tip I would say is, yeah, just be accountable to yourself and really write down where your time is going for a week, and down to like the minutes and the half hours. And there's books, 168 hours, and also I Know How She Does It is actual time logs of successful women in all different types of career paths. And some are, most, I would say mostly working moms, but I think it shows like their literal time logs of like how much they sleep when they work. And it kind of just illuminates like on a given day, maybe you won't find that perfect balance that you're looking for, but in a given week, you want to make sure that you can say all my goals and life priorities are here, and that it's charted out. And there's some flexibility to it, but I think that to me, I go back to it because there are some days that are leaned towards, hey, I'm in my office for 6 hours, I'm not with my kids. Other days, I don't have meetings during these hours and I'm focused on them. And during over the course of a week, it feels balanced. So I think just giving ourselves permission to really, yeah, just even in any type of situation, I think you might have more control over your schedule than you think you do. That's another thing that I would say to my clients too. And so when they get that intentionality and regain some of that responsibility and seeing what a tool that time is, then they're really empowered. I don't know if that's practical enough.
Yeah, those are such good tips. I was nodding along the whole time. I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. And I like how you touched there on the balance might not be there day to day, but over the week, if you look at your
Yeah.
schedule and you're intentional, you can get that balance because naturally there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be some days that are busier than others, or we're prioritizing our work or a family more on one day
Mhm.
versus the other. But looking at
Right.
it on that bigger scale of a week to see, is this working for me and my family? And if
Mhm.
it's not, adjusting from there. And I think you're right about like being on devices. They can be such a suck of our time and they're useful in so many ways, but they are
Mm,
built to be
yeah.
addictive. So we have to be really intentional and aware and honest
Mhm.
with ourselves with how much we're using them because we can all be busy, but that doesn't mean that we're being productive or doing anything
Mm,
of value or that's valuable to us, I should say. So just being really aware of how you're spending your time and
mhm.
documenting it, like you said, is great. I'm gonna check out that book about I Know How She Does It. That'd be fascinating to read how
It's
people
really good.
structure their day.
It's Laura Vanderkam, and she wrote 168 Hours. And it really challenged me at a time when I was like, I have 5 kids and I'm trying to run a business and homeschool. How can I do it all? And it helps me reset my perspective on time and, how we see it, right? Because even all these things are mindset shifts, like busyness. That's like a mindset. Like, I want to be busy. Like, why do you want to be busy? Why do you want to appear busier? Like, what's that? What's feeding that? And also, I mean, even for us, right? Like, we can equate like busyness with success. And it's like, what if we actually just turn the tables and like I could work less and be more successful? So that's where the 10X book helped me as well to think about that. And anyway, yeah, I think like all of these things deserve almost like a whole podcast. All these different topics are just so powerful. So I love that we were able to jump around and cover a lot of them. But I think having these conversations, like real examples, that book that I showed, like the actual time logs, like it just gives you permission to say, okay, like there's not one right way to do this. There's many different, powerful, beautiful ways that women are doing this, and just leaning into that and finding your path, which I know you really emphasize. So I'd love to even, like as we kind of conclude, I'd love for you to hear like, how you support moms to finding and jumping into like their more individualized paths.
Yeah, what I do is I help people figure out what they want first by becoming aware. So becoming aware of what it is that they want. And the first step in that is finding out what is keeping you stuck. So what are the big
Mhm.
barriers? And either labeling them and figuring out what you can do to move past them, or
Mhm.
just setting them to the side if you don't need to address them immediately, and then looking at what you do want. And that can be fun initially, just
Mhm.
dreaming and using visualizations to figure out what you
Mhm.
want your life to look like in the future. And then getting a bit more specific with that, of looking at what your priorities are. And like you said,
Mhm.
with time, often we can be spending our time in ways that isn't how we want to be. And it's the same with priorities. We can look at our days and our weeks and
Mhm.
realize, you know what? Looking at what I do and what I think about and what I focus on doesn't align at all with what I actually value in my life. So getting really clear on what your
Mhm.
top priorities are and making sure that you're included on that list is really important. And then looking at what you
Yeah.
value. So as in, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want your kids and your partner and those around you to describe you? So I call these values, but some people call them guiding principles or even
Mhm.
personal qualities. So getting clear on like what sort of person you want to be. And then
Mhm.
from there, getting clear on what you need and using all these aspects. So, what's keeping you stuck and how you can move around that, your priorities, your values, and what you need. So, often we have unmet needs that we don't even know about. So, getting clear on
Mhm.
those. If we can take those and use those to help us make decisions to move forward, that can really help. And all that starts with awareness. So, that's a strategy that I use. That's what I talk about in my first book, The Motherhood Reset. And I find that that's a really good starting
Mhm.
place because we can be so out of touch with all of that. And we can just follow along with what we're doing already or what society tells us to
Mhm.
do or what our best friend is doing, but it might not be what works for us. So I think that awareness is such a key
Mhm.
piece.
I love that. I think even just the term, like that phrase, that framework, the motherhood reset, it just lets us all exhale and take a deep breath, because we're so used to just being like, oh, the whole world's depending on us. We don't have permission sometimes. We don't give ourselves permission to say, like, I need this. And what you're saying is just so impactful, because as soon as we say, all right, it's time to reset, it means everything around us is going to reset as well and improve. So it's just reclaiming that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So can you let us know a little bit more about like how people can work with you and where they can find out more about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This has been so much fun. So I am currently working on several different models. I tend to have people start with my 5-week course, the life design course. If they want to work with me more personally, VIP coaching, we usually start with that course. And then we kind of tease out what their goals are, what their needs are. And through walking through those 5 weeks, they get access to me. And then at the end, if they want to do like more of a specific coaching, we set it up for them in those kind of 90-day increments that we talked about. And then really I would say on the other side that I spoke about, it's financial planning for busy moms, families, entrepreneurs, business owners. I just think that, there's a statistic that this year, 54% of the world's wealth is now in the hands of women, and that's switching over. So there's so many more neat reasons why we need to be empowered, educated. We often are earning equally or more in households. We are often responsible for how we're designing our budgets and our cash flow. So just really giving that, in the context of this whole conversation, I think there's a big kind of underlying topic is giving ourselves permission to say, this is what I want to create. Like, this is the legacy I want to have financially as well as personally. And how do I do that? Right. So that's a big part of what I'm focused on right now. And it obviously ties in with I run mastermind groups for entrepreneurs and, support business owners in their planning as well as individuals. So
Amazing. And where can we find
yeah.
all this? Is this on your website, or can you direct us to where to go?
Yeah,
I'll put
yeah.
it in the show notes, but if you could just say it, just in case people don't look at the show notes.
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, probably the best way to reach out to me is just to email me, hello@maddypidel.com. And I can direct you to the different things that you're interested in. Obviously, the website has a lot of it. I'm kind of partnering with several different firms and websites too. So you can just like share what you learned about or thought about today that sparks an interest. And I do a lot on Instagram too. So if you find me on there, then obviously we can have a conversation. So
And what's your Instagram handle?
it's at Maddy Pidel, MADDYPIDL.
Amazing. It's simple. It's
Thank
good to use
you.
your name.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation all about like so many different topics, motherhood,
Yeah.
business, and everything does really integrate together, doesn't it? Like we don't live our lives in these separate compartments. Everything flows into each other. So I think this conversation was a lovely example of that. So thank you so much. Was there anything that you wanted to share before we part, before that I didn't ask you before?
I don't think so, but I think echoing what you said, just the power of this connection. Like, we met through another group that's doing amazing work with their podcast, and we found each other. And I think that's genuinely how women work and how we, are making a big impact, is that we understand that everything positive is going to build on each other, right? So, I think that just that collaborative mindset, and for anyone listening to this, like, share this podcast with like 5 friends that you think should listen to it, because I think that there's an incredible impact that we can make together, and just those simple daily connections with other inspiring women, that's literally what's going to end up making the difference and changing lives. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
thank you.